We're going through Christian Worldview, and this is planned to be 23 weeks. And in that 23 weeks, we hope, and let me just read from the first page, because it's been a while since we've done this. Christian Worldview, a study of understanding how to follow Christ. I mean, that's the whole purpose of this, right? How to follow Christ. Not why, not when, not who. How to follow Christ. It's 23 weeks long, and we've talked about big picture, we've talked about a Christ-centered view of Scripture, we've talked about the three trees growing and the power of culture, and then we get into these 10 fruits, these fruits of worldview. And so we've talked about theology, philosophy, ethics, biology, psychology. We're finishing up sociology today. We still have law, government, economics, history, and technology. So technically 11 fruits to go. Someone remind us, what are the three major worldviews in the world? Christianity, transcendentalism, naturalism. Transcendentalism and naturalism. And, okay, so we're going to finish up sociology today, but let me just say this to you. We could spend... hey Josh, is there a way that I can sit down? Is there a way for you to move that camera in such a way that I can sit down? I'd really like to sit there. We're a smaller group, and I would really like to do that. Can you do that? Awesome. Thank you. Sociology, I could spend like 8 more weeks on this. Just know that. It's going to feel like we're doing a lot today. It's because we are. So, and I'll show you. Can y'all see this? This is what mine looks like. Do y'all see all those scribbles and lines? And I'm using 2 colored pens. And, there's just a lot here. So, let's get into it. Can I get somebody to agree to read Genesis 2, 18 to 25? Raise your hand. Ian. How about Matthew 16? Stacy. How about 1 Peter 2? Rebecca. Jeffrey, you want to read Genesis 11, 1 through 9? And those are the passages that we'll read. And as soon as somebody gets to Genesis 2, we'll go ahead and start with that. Genesis 2, 18 to 25. Okay, so, and I should have done this before Ian started reading, but just let me say this now. So what we're doing today is we're just talking about 3 of the spheres of authority, right? We're just talking about 3 of them. And keep in mind, these 3 in particular were designed by God. They were ordained by God. They were given to humanity by God. And they are family, church, and state. Family, church, and state. When we get to the state, we'll talk about the messiness of that. And obviously, when would we say the church was founded? When would we say the church was founded? Yeah, Pentecost, so after the resurrection. And so what about before then? Well, we would say religiously, we would say Judaism, which Christians claim as our origins, right? So we would say, going back to the Old Testament, going back to Adam, going back to Eve, the church is created when God creates the religious institutions of He's there, we're here, and we need Him, right? So when we say church, we mean all of that. Are you with me? So Christians, when we say, what are the 3 institutions that are most important, family, church, and state? When we say church, we do mean pushing it all the way back. Okay? When we read Genesis, we're not thinking that doesn't apply to us. We're thinking that it absolutely does apply to us. As a church even. You with me? So, family, church, and state. So when Ian read Genesis 2, 18 to 25, y'all understand that that's one of the most beloved, known passages about what? Creation of man, woman. Be a little louder, Caleb. And then family, right? God creates the union of family. I don't think I've ever been to a wedding that didn't in some way quote Genesis 2, 18 to 25. Even today, Christian ministers are still going back to this ancient text to begin to understand the institution, to begin to understand the importance, to begin to understand its divine placement. So family. Who's got the ones for Matthew 16? Okay, Stacy? Okay, so let's... I'm sorry, I had 6 thoughts in my head at once, and I got to pull the one thread. You ever do that, Jeffrey, when you're teaching?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a weird thing, right? Sorry, still doing it. Still got 6 threads up there. We're talking about the church here. Oh, here it is. There it is. Some people will say Pentecost, right? Caleb Wilson said Pentecost as the start of the church. That's a fine start. No one's going to argue against that. But there are other places where we might point to as saying the start. I kind of like the messiness of it all. You could say, when does the church start? And you could probably get all the way back to Genesis on that one. But this is one of the places that we might say is the start of the church. There's really only 2 ways to interpret this passage. What is this in this text? What is the foundation of the church? There's really only 2 answers. 2 historical church answers to this passage.
Jesus.
Well, Jesus, yeah, that's the one we're going to go with. There are denominations, the Catholic Church in particular, that says Peter is the first pope because he is the first to declare Christ as Lord. Protestants are going to say it's a little more complicated than that, right? Jesus says to Peter, "You are little rock, Cephas, and on this rock I will plant my church." Well, Catholics read that and go, yeah, Peter's the first pope. Protestants read that and go, no, Peter's declaration, Jeffrey, that Jesus is Lord is the start of the church. And I think that's a solider, more solid foundation. So those are the 2 ways that people interpret that text. We're going to go with the foundation stone, which is Jesus, and the declaration that He is Lord. Y'all with me? So what's the start of the church? Christ is the start of the church. And the fact that He is Lord, and the fact that Peter declares it is sort of one beginning, or a beginning of that. Why do I feel so strong? Why did Jeffrey and I feel so strongly that it's the declaration? Go to 1 Peter chapter 2. Who had that? Go ahead, Rebecca. Read it as loud as you can. Thank you, Rebecca. Now, why did I put this passage with the other passage for the church? And Jeffrey, I'll just go to you because we need to move on with this, and we'll do this quickly and move on. So, who's speaking here? Peter. Peter says, who is the living stone, cornerstone, chief stone, capstone, big stone? Christ. Right? Peter says Christ is the foundation of the church. Which is a good reason for us to say back in Matthew, Peter understood what Jesus was saying to him. Right? Then Peter says, and you are like... use the stone imagery. Peter then says, you are like living stones. Now, I'm imagining that Peter has it in his mind that they're also little stones, not the least of which is his nickname. Also, you don't put bigger stones on top of big stones. You put littler stones on top of big stones. Are you with me? You put the big stone first, then you put the little stones on top of it. Rebecca, I don't have any problem calling myself the little stone, right? So Jesus is the stone that makes Peter stumble, the stone that makes Peter fall. You gotta love that little rock uses such beautiful Old Testament imagery that was given to him by his Lord to describe the church. Priests, stones, living, fellowship, family, believers, built on Christ. Final thoughts or words about any of that? Okay, state. Who's got the passage? Brother Jeffrey, is that you?
Yeah. Genesis 11. Now the whole...
This is an important passage. This passage is way more important than most people realize. Can I just say it that way? As a child, I just knew this as the Tower of Babel and moved on, right? Like, learned it as a child, Tower of Babel. God didn't want people building towers, and that was it, and I was out, right? Then as a young man, I learned it, and I was like, wait, there's more here. And I started studying it, researching it. Now as an older man, I'm not going to say old man just yet, and you may call me an old man, but I will refuse to call myself an old man just yet. But as an older man, this text is rich. It is deep. So let's say a few obvious things. What major worldwide event has just taken place? No, just before this. The flood. Are y'all with me? The flood has just happened, right? That's the last major worldwide event. So what's happened now? The sons of Noah have now started to refill the earth. You with me? And so the sons, the grandsons, the great-grandsons, we're a few generations in, right? So the descendants of Noah have decided and taken upon themselves to do what? To make a nation for themselves. That's a really good summary, Caleb. To make a nation for themselves. Good. Someone else?
God told them to replenish the whole earth, and they're going to stay there.
Yeah. So there's disobedience in play. I feel like I knew that, but I haven't processed that. That's good. God told them to fill the earth, and they're wanting to camp out. Why do they want to camp out together? I knew the why. I didn't think about the what. Why do they want to camp out together? Security? Familiarity? Power? What's the opposite of faith and trust? Security? Power? Right? So they are seeking. Now listen, don't think that I'm thinking too much into that. How do they build the tower? What do they use? Bricks instead of stone. What's the most obvious tool to use? Stone. It's a land of stone. What's the biblical metaphor for God in the Bible? One of them. Stone. We just read 2 passages on it. They choose to make bricks, which are not as strong, not as long-lasting, but it's something I can do. Look what I can do. Look how clever I am. Look how strong I am. Look how smart I am. Look.
Oh, since Jesus is so blown away.
That's right.
Something that just occurred to me too was that they were made out of the earth themselves by God. And now they're taking over that role. Like a blasphemy. The
whole thing, Jeffrey, we don't have time to do it today. I shouldn't have even done as much as I did. Because we got to talk. I can spend 6 hours on this. The Tower of Babel, to your point, to all of our points, Tower of Babel is a powerful, rich text. It's all here. It's the start of religion. It's the start of religion. It's the start of religion, y'all. Let us come together and make bricks that we may make a name for ourselves and get to Him. Jeffrey, is that not a working definition of religion? Let us go to God? Let us go to God? How's that working for you, as Dr. Phil would say? It's never worked. So this is a rich text, but we got to move on. For our purposes today, it is the start of the nations. Right? So, mercy. Now I wish we could do it. I told you we could spend 8 weeks on this. We spend 8 weeks on sociology. Okay. Final thoughts from anybody? And it's just too much here. It's too much. It's beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. All right. So, let's do these quickly. Because we're not even close to drawing on the circles. Very quickly, what is the purpose of each sphere of authority? And I'm going to give you mine, but tell me some of yours. What is the purpose of family? What is the purpose of family? Just in your own words. Really loud, Caleb. Personal growth happens. I like that.
Nurture, procreation, and love.
Procreate in order. Procreation. Well, maybe not. Nurture, procreation, love. All right, all intertwined, actually.
Realize we're not strong enough.
Ooh, interdependence, deep dependence. Ooh, very well said, newly married man, showing the wisdom of one beyond your years. I commend you. No, I'm praising you, Josh. I'm not making fun of you. That's commendable.
I was getting with unity.
Unity, vision.
But unity is more like church.
No, it's okay. That's good. Someone else. What's the purpose of family? Can I give you mine? Can I give you what I believe is the biblical? It's everything else. It's God. I'm going to give you three things. It's God's goodness and grace to all. It's God's goodness and grace to all. Do all people come to church? Yes or no? Do all people become politicians? Yes or no? Do all people come from a family? Yes or no? It is the one test tube. It's the one laboratory in which all humans are grown. A family is a laboratory, and the thing that is created is a human. That takes place in a family. It's God's goodness and grace to all. Some of the best testimonies I've ever heard was children who grew up and said that their father showed them what God looks like. Some of the greatest testimonies I've ever heard was a child growing up and saying, "My father showed me God." Right? Secondly, what makes up a family? Remember, the biblical answer is always the best answer. What makes up a family? Name it. Say it, Caleb. Husband, wife, children. Am I saying that you're not a part of a family if you don't have a husband, a wife, or children? I'm not saying that. I'm saying the biblical model, the ideal, remains. It remained in the garden, it remains now. It's not changed. And there's billions and billions of data points to suggest that it is the best way to work. What blows my mind is how sociologists, y'all do understand we're studying sociology. What blows my mind is sociology is both a hard science and a soft science. Right? Sociology is both a hard science and a soft science. It's soft in the sense that much of it is made up of theory and application of the theory. It is a hard science in that sociologists for over 100 years now have been doing it hardcore, and since ancient times have been doing it all along, have studied families and come to really good conclusions after all their studies. Are you with me? So sociologists have gotten to the point where we can understand personality, nature, nurture, traits, behaviors, likelihoods of outcomes, successes, failures, etc., 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 which only props up what the Bible said all along. You know what a sociologist will admit to if they're a fair-minded sociologist who looks at the data, who looks at the studies, who looks at all the data for families? You know what a fair-minded sociologist will arrive at? The best outcome for a child is a home in which there's a husband, a wife, they are married, they are together. It's not complicated. So, anyway. Thoughts about that so far? So we're not saying your family has to have a husband, a wife, and a child, but we are saying it's the biblical model. It's been the biblical model forever, and it is the ideal situation. Thirdly, let's say this about family. It is for the glory of God and the good of mankind. The family is for the glory of God and the good of mankind. Families were created to be good. We said this last week, if you recall, but we said of the three institutions, which one is most under attack by Satan? It is the family. And it has been since the first family. Okay, questions or comments about the purpose of family? Questions or comments? All right, let's do the church. The church is easy. For the church, What would you say is the purpose of the church? What would you say is the purpose of the church?
Unity, body of Christ.
Be the body of Christ. Good. Someone else? Place to worship. Good. Evangelism. All right, now y'all are doing mine, so I'll go ahead and say them. Just put down the 5 purposes, these historical 5 purposes of the church. You've already named 2 of them. What are the 5 purposes of the church? I heard worship and I heard evangelism. Discipleship. Did you say worship? Fellowship. That's number 4. Not in order per se. And number 5, this one usually this one and fellowship get forgotten. Ministry. Ministry. Being the hands and feet. Right? Giving water. Doing work. Evangelism is evangelism, right? But ministry is ministry, right? So if I give water and then tell somebody that Jesus loves them, I've done 2 things. Are you with me? I've given water and I've told them Jesus loves them, which is a form of discipleship for me and an act of worship. And if I'm doing it with brothers and sisters, I'm also fellowshipping. Do you see how you can do all 5? Do you see? Okay, good. Questions about that? We'll move on from that one because it's easier for us to understand. Questions? Comments?
I learned those 5 when I was in the class with. It was I can't remember the exact name of the class, but we touched about those 5.
Helpful, isn't it?
Yes.
All right. Moving on to the state. What would you say the biblical purpose of the state is? The nation, the state, the powers that be. What would you say the biblical purpose is?
Protect people, suppress evil.
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to use almost exactly those words. Brother Jeffrey said, protect evil. Excuse me.
Protect good.
Oh, Nate, it's been a long day. Protect people, suppress evil. That's cleverly said, by the way. Did you learn it that way?
No.
Yeah. Just a clever lad, aren't you, Brother Jeffrey? And when I don't mess it up, it's even more clever. Someone else? Someone else? All right, well, let's just go with that. Let me say it this way. Protect freedoms of law-abiding citizens. Jeffrey's is easier. Mine is longer. Protect the freedoms of law-abiding citizens from lawbreakers. Protect people, he said. That's easier to write down. And I like suppress evil. I'm going to write suppress evil on mine. Here's the second one that I have. These are the 2 that are broadly considered. The second one being provide the common good. Provide the common good. That one covers things like roads and libraries. Now, what's the challenge? What's the challenge? What? What's the challenge of providing common good? What's the challenge of that? Complacency, okay. I can think of 2 other things as well.
Who decides?
Who decides what is commonly good?
Yeah, because you would say libraries, I'd say basketball.
Yeah. And how much are we willing to provide? Right? These are real questions. We've gotten far, far away from original intent for common good. Right? You know, we have people saying that the internet is a human right now. Right? I'm not sure that the internet is a human right. Right? Is it good? Do I like the internet? Yeah. Do I think I have a right to it as a human? I don't. I don't actually think that. So this one's tricky, right? But it is a part of government. Okay. Questions about, so we did number 1. Number 2, what has happened over the flow of history? Now look, we don't have time to do all of these, but I want you to have a sense of this. How has family changed from, say, Jesus' time to the Industrial Revolution to now? Let's do those 3 moments in time. How has family changed from Jesus' time, Industrial Revolution, let's say 400 years ago, to now? Somebody tell me. Family.
At its core, no. It hasn't changed.
Oh? You're talking like a young man now. How has family changed from Jesus' time to the Industrial Revolution to now?
I'd say there's a lot less caring for the elderly parents.
Less care for, can we say, the needy? I mean, I don't know. Raise your hand. When's the last time you've been to the West Coast? Raise your hand. Was it in the last 2 years, 3 years, 4 years? I've been to the West Coast in the last 5 years. Literally every street is nothing but tents. By the way, I went to Chicago recently. Even Chicago, which you wouldn't have me in a tent in Chicago in December, January, February. There are tents up and down streets in Chicago. We can argue about how those people's needs should be met. We can argue about that. But those people's needs are not being met in certain ways. It's not just it is the elderly. It's the unborn. We've killed more people than the Canaanites ever thought about killing. Right? The Canaanites could have only dreamt of as much baby killing as modern man has done. Modern man has killed hundreds of millions of innocents. Hundreds of millions. The Canaanites they were just amateurs compared to what we've done. So the elderly, the infant, the needy among us. What else? What was the question? I've already forgotten it.
We don't have the same definition of husband, wife.
We don't even have the same definitions. You've got husband and husband. You've got husband who used to be a wife. You've got polyamory. You've got 2 husbands and a wife. Good. Someone else. What's smaller? In what way, Wilson?
Since the Industrial Revolution, people
shrunk. Families have shrunk.
stopped having children.
Yeah. Good. We've stopped having babies, which is another way to go back to Genesis and say we've stopped living out the mandate. We talked about this a couple weeks ago, so I'm not going to give a long answer on that again. But yeah, someone else.
With society, like the world says, what a man's supposed to.
That's right.
Like what the husband's supposed to.
Gender roles. Good. Did in the Industrial Revolution, most women did not work outside the home, right? So had one worker income. Going back again, let's say 400, 500 years ago, for all of human history, where was a son raised? Through all of human history, where was a son raised? With his father. Where was a daughter raised? With her mother. Listen, if a man was a widower in the ancient world, this is all through the Bible. It's all through history as well. If a man has 3 children and just became a widow, what's the first thing he does? What's the first thing he does? Remarries. This is not complicated. He's got 4 children, 5 children, 6 children. He's lost his wife. He goes and gets another. Does that mean he didn't value his first wife? No. She gave him 5 children. He had beautiful years with her. But he knows he can't tend a field 60 hours a week, 70 hours a week, and raise 5 children. And it's not fair to the 5 children. So he goes and finds another wife. And with her, he may have another 3 children. And some of you might be creeped out and weirded out by that, but that's how we get to 10 billion people, y'all. We're about to hit 10 billion people on the planet in the next 20 years. Good. Okay. So what else were we saying? So Caleb, is family the same as it's always been? No. Dramatic changes to the family. Who's raising children? Father and a mother? Who's raising children? Oh, it's the state. There it is. Who's raising families now? Is it the church? No. Is it the family? No. Who's raising kids? Schools are an arm of the state, people. Now, you may be going to a private school that may be funded by your parents' monies, and that's one step removed, but it's a better step. Best place to raise a child in the home. Second best place to raise a child in a Christian school. Third best place to raise a child in a private school. Fourth best place to raise a child in a public school. And I'm telling you now in 2024, I don't think the fourth best option should be your option. And I've done all four. So that's not a knock on anybody. This is reality. For all of human history, dads raised boys and moms raised girls. Moms raised both and dads raised both. For all of human history. And you really only had two options. This is not a terrible thing. If your dad mended shoes, you were likely to mend shoes. But let's say this. Let's say that Dad identified you were a very clever boy. You were a very intelligent boy. Dad could work out some agreements with his very clever friend who was an attorney, and the clever friend could take you on as an intern. What's the word? As an apprentice. The words are gone because we haven't done it in 300 years. And you could be an apprentice to an attorney, to a barrister. And then guess what? That barrister's getting free shoes for the rest of his life. It was a great system. It worked really well. Not perfect. There's never been a perfect system worked out by men, but worked really well. People had value and took care in their work. They weren't minimized in the world. So there's no way we're getting through all this. Number 3, told you it takes 8 hours. Let's just answer this for number 2. What has happened over the flow of history? Answer that for me. What has happened over the flow of history as it relates to these 3 spheres? Steady decline. Which of these spheres has gotten more powerful in the flow of history? States gotten more powerful. Raise your hand if you agree with that. I do. And by the way, in modern era, I'm putting corporations with states. We're going to end up in a corporo state just any day now. Right? We're this close away to having, you're going to say the pledge to Coca-Cola as opposed to the pledge to the United States. We're this close from that. So when I say the state, I do mean corporations. I mean all of it. Right? I mean all of it. The bureaucratic power right now is stronger than the power of the vote of the people. We're so far removed from the people having a voice in all the nations, not just America or China, all the nations, right? So, states very powerful. What sphere of authority was most powerful in the ancient world? Of these 3. In the ancient world, think 5,000-6,000 years ago. Family. We call the era of like Adam to Abraham and beyond, the era of Adam to Noah, we call that the era of the patriarchs. Y'all have heard that word, right? The era of the patriarchs, where every husband/father was the high priest of his own family. The patriarchs. You're told all the time, this is how you know that the world is lying to you. You're told all the time you still live under the patriarchy. That would be laughable if it weren't so evil. Because it's evil, I don't think it's funny. I don't think it's funny at all. Because it's so terribly evil. The last thing you live in is an age of patriarchs. But there was a time where the world exploded in population and lots of good things happened. Era of the patriarchs. So the family was the most dominant in the ancient world. And do you agree that the state is the most popular, most powerful now? Okay, so that's number 3. Which sphere of authority was? That's number 3. Number 4. Does God have much to say about these spheres of authority? What is good and evil? Does God have much to say about these 3 spheres? Family, church, and state? Yes or no?
Yes.
Thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of verses about these things. Thousands and thousands and thousands of verses. Brother Jeffrey, is there anything else you would say on that? It's self-evident, right? Number 5, what is the relationship between these spheres? Let's talk about this. Let's try to write some lines in very quickly. Let me give them to you because we are getting close on time, and then you can add any ones you like. I want you to think about positive influence and negative influence. Positive influence and negative influence. You with me? In other words, these 3 spheres interact with each other in positive ways and in negative ways. Let's do the easy one first. Let's do church and family. What's a positive way, you tell me, what's a positive way that the family can influence the church?
It's like the families, Christians, like that their fellowship with one another would be just as good, if not better than.
Yep. So how can they influence the church positively?
That when the fellowship they enjoy, the worship that they have in their faith is brought into the church.
Good. So in other words, if a family is a family of Christ followers, then how can they positively influence the church? Then they are now actively in the church as Christ followers, and everyone is getting to what? Benefit from their leadership, their time, their talent. Are you with me? That's a good one. You can write that down. What's another one? What's a positive way that the family can influence the church? Yeah, and we're going to talk about that and how the church can influence the family. Yeah. We'll do that. Let's do that. Let me just say this. That's enough of an answer for you to put down. I wrote down that the family can give a support of leadership, time, and talent. A support of leadership, time, and talent to the church. So Caleb, I think that's enough of an answer to say that how can the family support the church positively? By literally making the church from itself. Right? Okay. So, brother, you said that the church can support the family positively by guidance, morals. Good. So I wrote down corporate worship supports the family, support network, and spiritual growth. So a lot of those purposes, discipleship, which is a type of discipline, discipleship, evangelism, right? How many children became Christians because of the church's efforts? How many children became a Christian while they were in church? None? A lot. Yeah? Someone else. Anything else we would say about the church and family? This one makes the most sense. That's why I start with it.
They also give the parameters for marriage.
Parameters for marriage? Yeah. Yeah. Theological. Can we expand that to just say just solid? What's another way of saying that? Like all over, just like parameters for, spiritual training, living, life. Yeah, good. Someone else. Anything else to add? All right, so again, this is the easier one for us. Let's do some negatives. How can, and I will tell you now, I just put arrows both ways for this one. It's hard for me to pull this one apart. This one's hard for me to pull apart. So how can a family hurt a church and how can a church hurt a family? Think broadly. How can a church hurt a family? How can a family hurt a church?
I've known cases where churches were dysfunctional and messed up the members.
That's right. That's right. Churches have harmed families intimately and physically and financially and emotionally. What else? That's going to be based. Anybody else want to add? I wrote by not supporting, so like the family can harm the church by not supporting it. The church can harm the family by not supporting it. Right? If a family is in turmoil and the church just says, I'll pray for you, is the church helping the family?
Not enough.
Not enough. Not enough. Right? And we're real turmoil. Okay? Harming the mission. The church, this is, Brother Jeffrey, that's what I think you were saying. The church can harm the mission of the family can harm the mission of the church.
So really it's a two-way street.
Absolutely. All of these are. All of these are. And then the third one I put was they can lead people astray. Families can lead the church astray, and churches can lead the family astray. Are y'all thinking about this maybe for the first time ever? Raise your hand. Maybe the relationship between these spheres? I'm not saying you've never thought about church or family, but these spheres, they interact with each other. They bounce off of each other. They overlap each other. Any questions about that? Or comments? Questions or comments? All right, still have 2 to do. We'll close with the family and state. Let's do the church and state. Do the church and state. What are some positives that the state can do for the church? What are some positives that the state can do for the church?
Get a message out, like.
Why would the state care about the message of the church?
Well, I mean, as in oh, sorry, never mind.
Yeah, how can the state positively influence or affect the church? Well, I'm not going to argue for that, but I hear you. I hear you. Well, sort of. I'm going to sort of argue for that. Yeah. Let me give you 2 of them. They can uphold the core values. If the president gives an annual speech, wouldn't it be nice if he upheld the core values of the religious institutions of his nation? Wouldn't it be nice if the major political leader of a nation in some way said, hey, churches have value? Wouldn't that be nice? Or would you rather have your political leaders say, church is evil, you don't need it, it should go away, causes harm? In America, we're at the point where politicians are what? Positive towards religion, negative towards religion, or ignoring religion. What point are we at?
I'd say one party pretends to follow them and the other one is hostile.
Okay. I can't argue against that. I'm going to say we're at the point politically where the politicians are just ignoring us. But I can't argue against that. I think it's going to get a lot more hostile. I think they mostly just pretend we don't exist. Yes, sir.
I was going to say the state, help the church by what America already has, religious freedom.
Exactly right. That's the second one, Josh, that I have. Protect the rights to worship. Protect the rights to worship. And to protect the right to worship, you have to be leaning in or leaning away. As a human, we're just kind of built that way, right? They need to have positive thoughts about us in order to do that, generally. So those are 2 examples. They're not all of them. Can we think about negative ways that the state affects the church? This one's easier. Can we think about negative ways that the state affects the church? Now, brother, this is where I agree with you. We don't want a state-run church. This is why we were sort of agreeing. We don't want a state-run church. Y'all agree with that? In any nation, because you never know what you're getting and never know what you're signing. And by the way, it's just not the way the spheres of authority were lined up. God never told the state to take care of the church. Never. He wants them to be unified. In a best possible outcome, they will be. In Christ's kingdom, they will be one. Right? What's another negative? How can the state affect the church negatively? Persecution. Caleb, I wrote the state can inhibit the church. The state can inhibit the church. And that includes all the way up to persecution. So you don't want the state getting involved in the dealings of the church. Does the state get involved in the church in the U.S.? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. More so now than ever? Yes.
In schools where
Yes. Yes. Third one. Anybody? The state can affect the church negatively by, and this is the one you may not think of, imposing moral codes on citizens and church. When a politician stands up there and says, "This is good," do you understand he just made a religious statement? He may not even know he did that, but he did. This is good and we're going to follow it. This is bad and we're not going to follow it. That politician is talking in terms of morality. He's talking in terms of religious morality. And trust me, the nation, the state, does impose its values on the church. So this is related to the inhibitions, right? Other thoughts, questions, comments? State and church. Thoughts or questions? We're moving at a super fast pace because, again, there's so much we could do here. All right. How can the church positively affect the state? How can the church positively affect the state?
We are commanded to pray for the rulers.
Pray? Pray for the state? Can I say obey the laws of the state, including taxes? Obey. Jeffrey, how many verses in the Bible about just obey your leaders because God put them in charge of you? Many, 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 right? Many, many, many. Pray for, obey. What else? This is the one you may not think about. Baptists are terrible at this. You know how I know Baptists are terrible about this? How many Baptist presidents has the U.S. had? One. By the way, arguably the most moral president the U.S. has ever had. Arguably the most moral president. Arguably. Baptists are terrible at this. We're supposed to create, within the church, we're supposed to create leaders willing to govern morally and wisely. The church is supposed to create leaders who govern wisely and morally. Do y'all agree with that? So it's a way that the church can positively affect the state. Other denominations do a great job of this. Baptists do a terrible job at this. We don't emphasize it. We don't talk about it. In fact, I tell young people to run away from politics as quickly and as quickly as you can and go as far as you can. But I probably shouldn't do that. Right? I should probably say to young people, have you thought about politics? Are you with me? Does that make sense? Okay, how can the church negatively affect the state? How can the church negatively affect the state? Let me give it to you quickly. Just lack of influence. Lack of influence is the big one for me. Which is kind of where we're at. Also disobeying, being disobedient, being unchristlike in the political sphere. You know, oftentimes my Christian brothers and sisters who are right morally act immorally, even as they're right morally. And does that do harm or good? It does harm.
I was thinking failing to do compassion ministry makes the government do what they're not supposed to be doing.
Great. Can you say that one again so everybody can write it down?
Failing to do compassion ministry makes the state pick up something that they're not supposed to do.
Brother Jeffrey, that one, we failed at that one for so long that most of us don't have an understanding of it. When did we really start failing at that? Really, big time. Well, okay, you have a richer vein of I'm going to say in this country, I'm going to say the 1960s, when we gave so much of that power over to the state with in the 40s, the New Deal, but then also in the 60s with so yeah. But I hear you. I might argue a little bit with we created Sunday school in the 1800s in the United Kingdom, to take the street urchins off the street and feed them, house them, and
Salvation Army was 1800.
yeah. So I might poke at it a little bit, but and I'm not saying that anyway. It's complicated. Let's wrap this up. How does the state positively affect family? Let me give them to you. Since we're running out of time, let me give them to you, and then you can make comments. How does the state positively affect family? Protect and provide. Protect and provide. Mostly protect. Protect citizens and provide the common good. How can the state take care of the family? Just do those two things and then get out of the way. And let's do the negative. How can the state negatively affect the family? I bet you know this one. Too many of everything. Too many taxes, too many restrictions, too much influence, too many infringements of rights. Just too much, too much, too much. The state has an opinion about everything as it relates to the family. Do you know that there are tons of laws? Listen, there are tons of laws on the books about how a family can homeschool their own children. I don't mean a few laws. I mean tons of laws. Mississippi is one of the few states in which homeschooling is really, really free, and the federal government hates that about us, and would stop it if they could.
The government won't let my sister sell their house they own to their own son without charging them interest.
What state is that?
Tennessee.
Too many taxes, too many restrictions, too many influences, too many infringements of rights. Okay, let's wrap it up. How can the family positively affect the state? How can the family positively affect the state? Go ahead and say it. You know it. Taxes. Prayer. Obedience. That'll work. I wrote train citizens to obey, civic responsibility, and societal contribution. That's everything Jeffrey said. Pray. I'm going to put pray down. Pray, obey, pay. Pray, obey, pay. Just takes a little bit of effort. How can the church, how can the family let the state down? How can the family negatively affect the state? It's the opposite. What can they do? Don't pay your taxes, disobey. Train lawbreakers. If you've ever been in a barbecue or a family or a home, or heard or been in conversations where children were being raised and adults were talking about how disobeying and breaking the laws is just natural and good, you understand that a nation can fall. What's the quickest way a nation can get destroyed? Historically, do more nations fall from outside forces or from inside forces? Historically. Inside forces? I'd have to do the math on that. I'd have to look at the data. What's the one what's a different way of saying this? What's the avoidable one? You can't always help it if outside forces come in and destroy your country. You can't always help that. Can you stop it from inside forces destroying your country? Purge the evil, constrain the evil. It requires faith, it requires humility, it requires obedience, it requires longevity, etc., etc. Final thoughts or comments? This is too much to do in 45 minutes. Final thoughts or comments? Does God care about the nations? Does God care about church? Does God care about family? This is, yeah. There's a lot of powerful mysteries when we begin to study sociology. Sociology is just another way of saying people, right? We're still just talking about people. We're still talking about people. Can you control the nation? Let me close with this. Can you control the nation? Raise your hand if you think you can control the U.S. Good. There are no incredibly severe sociopathic narcissist in the room. Can you control that I know of? Can you control this church? Raise your hand. Good. Can you control what you do in your family? Raise your hand. Can you control what you do in your family? That remains constant. That remains constant. From Adam to now, I can control who I am, what I believe, and who I follow in my family. Can I control my children, who are all 3 adults now? Can I control my wife? Insert joke here. Can I control me? Can I change me? Right? God is good, and He uses these 3 spheres of authority in profound ways. And He has used them throughout all of human history. Brother Jeffrey, I think, because I know you think big picture, and I think big picture, and I like to talk that way. I'm staggered that at the end of the Bible, this staggers me, that at the end of the Bible, last 2 chapters, New Jerusalem, New Earth, God's there and we're there, and that's about it. There's a tree, there's some water, it's a beautiful throne, there's a lot of light, it comes from Him. There's no natural light, there's no ocean. Remarkable 2 chapters. Do you understand that still the nations are mentioned in the last 2 chapters of the Bible? Still kings of the earth are mentioned in the last 2 chapters of the Bible? That blows my mind a little bit. Still mentioned. Nations aren't going away. Nations aren't going away. Families aren't going away. Church ain't going away. But I'm responsible for me, right? In these institutions.